that either assign themselves to your cohort or that are allies to that cohort,
sure,
then I'm going to send you the invite. So we've gotten really bold. When I talk about the rising tide lifts all boats, I don't think that level of getting honest and real would have really happened in just step changes, right? Little incremental, let's do something, let's rewrite a new play. That wasn't a new play for Deloitte. That was let's throw out the old playbook. We're not adding one field to talent on demand. We're going to rip out the whole page on talent on demand, rewrite it, and deploy it within a very complex system that runs 65,000 professionals in the U.S.
Okay. There's a lot of trends out there that we've even just discussed now, whether it's, the shifts in accounting itself or the demands, obviously, diversity, DE&I initiatives as well. You mentioned at the top that, you don't do social media. So a lot of people today follow these trends through social media, what people are talking about. Where do you learn about what you know? What are you reading? Who are you sort of following in terms of news or organizations or newsletters or conferences or podcasts, whatever it may be? Where do you get your information?
So, it's a real challenge, right? I think that this is the challenge of the day, is how do you get the facts and not the editorials, or the items that you sum up complex issues in a 3-word hashtag. I would tell you, I consume a lot of, news media, written and video, and a lot of opinion via podcast. And I tell you, I'm all over the place.
Okay.
I listen to stuff that absolutely makes my blood boil, and I listen to stuff that I completely agree with in 100 ways. But I gotta tell you, and the funniest thing, my wife was like, "You're like 10 years late to this party." So I read for the first time so it would have been like not this past November, but November before. I read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers.
Okay.
And I think I can sum up everything in life in Outliers. I absolutely, and so I listen to his podcast now, religiously, anxiously awaiting his next season. But I subscribe to a lot of, I subscribe quite frankly to a lot that Outliers kind of lays out, if you will. Have you read it? Are you familiar with it?
I've not read it, but I am familiar with it.
So, the basic concept is, right, that we all spend our time getting our 10,000 hours to be an expert. And if you aren't given the opportunity to get your 10,000 hours, your likelihood of being an expert is pretty high. And so he goes into a couple of things, right? He studies like the Canadian national hockey team, and he looks at, so if you're on a hockey team in Canada, it's by birth year. And so if you've got a January birthday, then you're the oldest kid on the team. And if you've got a December birthday, you're the youngest kid on the team. And at the age of 24, that probably doesn't matter a whole bunch, right?
Right.
But at the age of 3.5, when you get on a hockey team, that's a pretty big difference. Right? The difference between being born in January and born in December is pretty amazing. And so what happens is all these kids with January to April birthdays get more skating time. They get more ice time. They start the game. They play more of the game. They then make better teams. They make the elite select teams. And so they get more what? They get better coaching. They get more time on the ice. They get to start. They get more, better instruction. They get to go to elite camps. And so then they make better teams, right? And so by the time they're 12, they've gotten their 10,000 hours. But the kid that had the November birthday, same talent potential, perhaps, right? But he never got the playing time, didn't get the time on the ice, maybe even just stop playing hockey altogether because it was just cold as hell sitting on the bench, watching all the other kids play and hearing your mom and dad complain about coming out and not seeing you play at all. Right. And the assumption was that hockey just wasn't for you. Maybe you were the next Wayne Gretzky, right?
Right.
Get your freaking 10,000 hours.
But you never got yeah, sure. Okay.
So I mention it all the time. It drives my whole family crazy.
I love that.
It's funny you bring it up. My old boss was obsessed with Malcolm Gladwell. So.
Hey, I want to shift a little bit more on the personal side, and this is again just to sort of get to know you a little bit better in terms of sort of how you think and such. In terms of news and entertainment, are you more of a reader or a watcher?
I'm a watcher and a listener, mostly. And I read, what's really interesting is that, in the days of travel, I was a much bigger reader. It was my decompression moment, on the plane. And although Wi-Fi did put a dent in that on the plane, but I've become less of a reader, I think, more lately, but I do still try to pick up a work at some point.
Are you more of a sort of like a book reader or a white paper reader, a document?
I tend to, if I'm going to read, I tend to read a book more so than I tend to read a lot of white papers just for work. And I assume you're talking about pleasure reading and not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I tend to read a lot of white papers at work. And so I tend to try to get something that lets my mind get away from that.
Okay. Speaking of which, any junkie topics that you sort of follow, whether it's sports, politics, travel, cooking, DIY, anything like that you sort of piques your interest?
I'm all over the place, right? So virtually everything you would have mentioned, I would have some, my wife and I took ballroom dancing lessons right before COVID.
Nice.
We took a cooking class a week. We're empty nesters now. So we're like, we got all this time on our hands. No sprinkle, ice cream parties for us. Right. And so we're just all over the place. So it's a little bit of everything.
Okay. You mentioned empty nesters. Tell me a little bit about your family life. I'm assuming, kids, obviously.
So 3 kids. The oldest is, a staff with our audit group. The middle one is graduating in May with an engineering degree and is going to be a staff with Deloitte Consulting. And our daughter is a freshman at Texas Christian University. And she doesn't know it yet, but she'll be starting an advisory. I'm just joking.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about, I was trying to get a sense of like your years growing up, were you sort of this one town guy or did you move around a lot? Any siblings and where do you fit in that chain? And really more importantly, what about your parents themselves and the work that they did? Did that sort of influence you at all into the career path that you took?
Yeah. So, born and raised in Alexandria, Louisiana, first airplane I ever got on was when I flew to Houston for my job interview with Shell Oil. We went on small family vacations, not big. My mom was a nurse's aide, high school educated, and enough kind of vo-tech to be a nurse's aide, which isn't some glamorous job by any stretch of the imagination. My father was also high school educated, and started at a local furniture store in the warehouse. He eventually was trusted enough to drive the truck and make deliveries. He then became the dock receiver person at the local furniture store. He then became a salesperson at that furniture store. He ultimately, became the director of sales, and then he became the assistant manager of the second location that they opened up of the store. And